Her work is raising a lot of possibilities of future research, is a very important work, and also perhaps there can be some, she has been questioned where her basic premise is concerned, especially by a young scholar called Shalini Shah. Shalini is saying that we cannot take the prostitute to be just a victim of the patriarchal system. In fact, she is saying, taking into consideration recent works on prostitution, many of them recent on the recent state of prostitution, 19th or 20th century. But taking cue from these works, she is saying that the Ganika, she is analyzing the classical Sanskrit literature from 7th to 13th century, and she is restricting her discussion to the Gonika who in return for sexual favors got money. So she feels that the other categories that Bhattacharya is mentioning, she doesn't consider them to be part of the institutionalized prostitution. So Shalini is saying that the Gonika, she could create a counterculture.
When she's using this word counterculture, what does she actually mean by it?
Yeah, what she means by counterculture is basically that the prostitute had her own independence, she had her own freedom, her own value systems by which she was creating her own space. So, in fact, what is interesting is she's using sometimes the same text that Sukumari Bhattacharya is using. Just both of them are analyzing from different angles.
Okay.
So you see, this is the very tricky part about ancient texts, ancient Indian texts, that there is
the interpretation
varies, and there can be a lot of reading in between the lines and a lot of reading of the texts. So she's saying that the kind of depiction that you have of the prostitutes in the literature, basically written by these male elite sections, that is their reaction to the freedom and the independence that the prostitute had. So they were threatened. What Sukumari Bhattacharya is taking as the evidence of victimization, she's saying that this is a reaction to the prostitute's freedom and counterculture, that they were threatened by the kind of alternative sexuality that the prostitute was posing. And how she's talking about this counterculture, here she's focusing on the prostitute's household, where the mother reigned supreme. Then she's talking about the prostitute, how she was subversive, or how her culture was subversive of certain norms of patriarchal ideology.
So she was wielding some kind of power.
Yeah, patriarchal ideology like childbirth, etc. Then how she dominated, how she could control her artha and dharma, and which was very different from the Kulabodhu, and definitely the way she could project her sexuality, the way she could command her sexuality. And here one of the finest, I would say, expositions of prostitution, which both Bhattacharya and Shalini mention, is Shudraka's Mrityakartikam. Now this text is basically slightly before our period, but the kind of depiction that you have about the relationship between Charudatto and Basanta Sena, I think that holds good for what the Gonika Vritti was basically like. So this, I feel, is a very interesting dimension of sexuality that we are getting. Now I will just end with a few other areas of research which are redefining gender relations. One is the woman's sacred space, and here you have very interesting work again by Vijaya Ramaswamy in South India, where she is trying to see the woman's sacred space in Bhakti movement and in Virashaiva movement. And then another important area of research that Kumkum Roy is pointing out in her very enlightening discussion that she's giving in her editorial in Woman in Early Indian Society, where she's talking about the multiple manifestations of the goddess. And she's saying that there's a lot of work on this, and there's a lot of study of these goddess cult, but the problem is when in some of the studies there is a tendency to equate the divine with the human. So one has to be careful in that. So with this, I think we can end today's discussion, and I would just like to, just to sum up, I would just like to highlight the important point that we started with Altaker.
Yeah.
So you can make out that it is very difficult to just think of woman per se. You know, woman, family, then marriage, none of these are monolithic categories. We have to think of regional variations. We have to go beyond a homogenized understanding when we are talking about gender relations in any part, any time, especially in the early medieval Indian society.